Through her mask, she watched the gaiety of the illuminated hall. It was an exquisite hall with 10 golden chandeliers hanging from the most amazing sculptured ceiling she had ever seen. The marbled floor reflected the chandeliers for all who cared to stop and admire, but no one did except Helen. This was because she had mastered the art of being the wallflower whenever she found herself in gatherings like this, which wasn't often anyway. She had always managed to avoid attending parties, but this one she couldn't say no to because, strange, she couldn't remember why she was there, and she couldn't recognize any of the faces around. She laughed softly. No one would blame her for not recognizing anyone, because everyone was behind a mask. Without meaning to, she began to play a game in her mind to see how many people she could recognize even with their masks on. Her first win was Mma. How could anyone not know that petite and curvy body in white bodycon gown could only belong to the wife of the richest man in Africa and beyond? Helen smiled as she remembered their intriguing love story, how they met, the adventurous romance that nearly cost her her life, and the never-ending happiness and love they then shared. As she watched Mma dancing with a man, no doubt Uche her husband, she sighed as she saw him whisper something to her, and she laughed and raised his mask and kissed him. Only the Okohas would be this bold with their show of affection. If she was ever going to fall in love, if the depth was not as deep as what Mma and Uche shared, she was not falling. Then she wondered if there was a man out there who would ever see her for more than what she was, plain Helen. Was there a man out there who would see beyond what the eyes presented, who would see through her soul and satisfy her great yearning for love, for someone to hold her, touch her, and offer a solid shoulder to cry on? Because lately she had done nothing but wake up shivering from the most horrifying nightmares. She shook her head from side to side, trying to shake up the disturbing thoughts her life story brought her. The thought that she could never have a life until she found out who she really was not only frightening, but also heart-wrenching depressing. To distract herself, she began to look around at other people mingling, laughing and enjoying themselves. Before long, her attention was caught by a couple, a ruggedly built man dancing with a girl, and the girl seemed to hang on his every word, even without his curly shoulder-length hair and tanned complexion. One would always recognize Chuck Obi by the way the ladies flocked around him. Even if there wasn't that, her heart would always recognize the one man it yearns for, but can't have. She sighed deeply, and as if she hadn't tortured herself enough, her eyes returned to Chuck and the girl clinging to him. She sneered, noticing that there were other girls waiting desperately for the music to end, so they could have their turn on the dance floor with him. Helen sighed with disgust and looked away, only to find a more interesting view of a couple who couldn't wait to take it to one of the empty rooms upstairs or to a more shadowy corner. She laughed at their foolishness. Suddenly, a deep voice spoke behind her, and the hairs on her nape stood on ends. "I have been watching you watch me," a deep husky voice she would recognize anywhere said behind her. She swirled around in anticipation. Chuck? When did he move from the dance floor? When did the music stop? Her heart stopped completely, and she took several shallow breaths to normalize her center, to remind herself that the man was well out of her reach and an embodiment of conceit. "I have not been watching you," she turned away from him. "Have you not?" he demanded, taking hold of her shoulders and turning her to face him. She stiffened her shoulders to stop his hands from spreading the slow melting of her organs that his deep voice had started. She slapped his hands off. "I know your arrogance would not take any other answer, so why bother?" He laughed softly. "That stiffening of your shoulders tells me different." She stared at him widely. afraid that he might have guessed what was going on in her mind. She was totally speechless and didn't know how to defend herself against this amazing but annoying man. Care to leave this venue? With you? I don't think so, she told him firmly, even as her heart began to race. Why would Chuck Obi want to leave the party with her? Did he really think that her stiffened shoulders meant, take me home, do whatever you want with me, and make me the happiest woman on earth? She turned to face him squarely, summoning her remaining strength. She scoffed at him and turned to walk away, but he caught her upper hand. You know you want to. She turned to give him a piece of her mind and to put him in his place once and for all. I too want that, very much. His words stopped her flow of angry words, and she stopped speechless, confused, and melting every second. She could feel her strength slipping away, and that frightening weakness for him slowly began to take over her mind and body. What is happening here? She asked herself. Was he becoming attracted to her, or? She heaved a sigh of disgust. Chuck was a first-class womanizer. That thought brought her back to earth, her equilibrium restored. He probably thought that she had been blending in with the walls, watching, waiting, and praying he took notice of her. What better woman to take home for a one-night stand than the one who would melt with longing and gratitude at first eye contact? Okay? Was she insinuating that she was that woman who would melt with gratitude at first eye contact? She had had more than eye contact with him. He had touched, caressed, and kissed her before, and she didn't melt with longing and gratitude. Yes, you did, her mind whispered. So much that you forgot your purse. So much that you are very afraid to go back and get it. Helen, Helen, he chanted. When will you ever let go and enjoy yourself? I was enjoying myself till you. I was kidding. He laughed. If he tried any harder, he would never know how much he hurt her in that moment. So he thought she was a plaything, a joke. He could deepen his voice, dim his eyes, and say words that are, look, even from the dance floor, I could see that you were enjoying yourself as much as these words are probably doing. She heaved a sigh. There was no need getting hurt for someone who would never care enough. It was a waste of energy. That kind of energy she didn't need at this point in her life. What are you even doing here? Don't you have more women to charm? I have had enough, and I think you have too. Come on, let's go. I will take you straight to wherever you want to go. Scout's honor. Helen heaved another sigh. She had wanted to leave the venue for a while, but had been too tired to order a cab. She knew Chuck. He wouldn't take advantage of her. He respected Mma too much for that. I will get my wrap. He smiled. Hurry, I would be outside. Did she know what she was doing? She asked herself on her way to get her wrap. Was she aware that she was about to leave with Chuck Obi, world's #1 playboy? Yes, she answered. She had already concluded that Chuck wouldn't harm her. Was she also aware that she was letting Helen, world's #1 weakling for Chuck, go home with him, ride in the same car, breathe the same air? No, Chuck wasn't the problem. The problem was Helen. But Helen being a weakling could not change her mind, because it was not every day she got to spend time with her dream come true. Outside, she breathed a sigh of relief. The fresh air was exhilarating and healing. After all the noise and stuffiness of the hall, this seemed like paradise. Where was Chuck? She looked around for him. Did he leave without her? He wouldn't be that cruel as to play that kind of game on her. Why would he? She asked. When dozens of women in there were falling all over themselves to go home with him? She smiled and cautioned herself. It was high time she abandoned her phobia of abandonment. What game could Chuck probably play on her? Project, let's see how easy she would follow? She laughed at her joke. Have you been waiting long? She smiled her answer and entered his camouflage-colored sports car as the porter held the door open for her. As soon as the door closed, he zoomed off. She had to hold on to the dashboard for a few minutes before getting the courage to do up her seat belt. She gave him a sidelong glance and saw he was smiling. He was driving a Bugatti at a lightning bolt speed and was smiling, like he was a passenger on the deck of a cruise boat with the sea breeze on his face. Please slow down a bit. He glanced at her and grinned. Afraid, are we? No, but some of us would love to see the next day. Don't worry, it's 2 a.m. The road is mostly clear and I'm not drunk. What about the streetlight poles, pavements and all the drainages? Gosh, for a quiet girl you have a black and suicidal mind. Better that than an accident. She smiled when she noticed the car slowing down. What exactly do you do for Mma? The question was sudden. She wasn't expecting it. She had thought he spoke only seduction and nothing more. I am the head designer and co-owner of his lingerie and bikini line. Interesting. I can't imagine that. Of course you could, she added silently. There was no womanizer alive who wouldn't appreciate her line of work, not when that womanizer was the sexiest man alive for 3 consecutive years. What is your favorite color? Red, she answered offhandedly. Mine too. I find red lace and silk the height of sexy. It is just a job, Chuck. I don't think so. If it were, you would not be any good at it. And I believe I've heard him sing your praises a time or two. Okay, yes, it is my job to create sexy, but it is more than that. I have to create elegance, class, and innocence too. Who cares about elegance and class in bed? What kind of men have you been dating? Good question, she said to herself, and thank goodness it was rhetoric. Else, there was no way she could tell this man she had not been dating for years now. Some advice? Always think sex when you design. Look, I can't have this conversation with you. So change of topic, he grinned and turned back to the road. She smiled foolishly, admiring his grin. Really? Was there anything about this man she didn't find sexy? Then she noticed they were on a dirt road. Suddenly, a foreboding feeling came over her. She had been here before. She turned to Chuck in panic, but he was back in his mask. What was going on? She asked herself in increasing dread. Why are you suddenly afraid? He didn't even sound like Chuck anymore, she noticed in heightened alarm. Where are we going? You know. Why are you wearing that mask? He laughed airily. But you know. Did she? She asked in fear so incomprehensible. Why are you clutching that red purse? She looked at her hands and found that she was holding a red purse. Then it came back to her. This was her past. Chuck was not in her past. We are almost there. She saw the red warehouse. Was she in a dream? If she was, she had to wake up before he took her in there. There was evil there. She began to struggle. Let me go. What do you want? But he only laughed harder, and then the door suddenly opened and she leaped out. Before she could fall on the ground, dreading the impact and the very painful roll it would involve, she woke up on her bed. Helen sat up breathing heavily, holding her head as if to ward off the severe headache and fever. The nightmare was not new. Ever since she woke up in the middle of a strange street, beaten to the half-inch of her life and no memory, she had always had this recurring nightmare, but this time it was a bit different. There was the red purse. Her red purse. It was the only item she had with her on that street that fateful day. It could mean something. It could be a connection to her past. It could help her remember. She jumped off the bed to look for it. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. No, she could not lose it, no. It was the only connection to her past. Then she remembered Chuck and remembered that she had left it the last and only time she was with him in his car. Then the dream began to make sense to her. She needed the purse back from Chuck, and and he had said she should come and get it herself. She slowly sat down on a couch. That she would very well do, she promised herself.
In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one I can't let go. In your arms I find my home, love.